The Uyghur Muslims of China. They are a Turkic ethnic minority in the northwestern region of Xinjiang in China, and we have commonly heard of them in the news for being forced into re-education camps where they are tortured, brainwashed, and harassed by the Chinese government. In recent years, China has been accused by world leaders and human rights groups for committing ethnic genocide against the Uyghur population. But while it's commonly painted as a black and white human rights issue, the Uyghur discussion is a much more complex reality that needs to be examined from a historic, political, and international perspective. So let's delve in. The Uyghurs are among the oldest Turkic-speaking people of Central Asia. Chinese records indicate their presence in the region as early as the 3rd century. The Uyghurs formed various kingdoms in the region, including in the current-day Xinjiang area in China, and were recognized for their rich culture, diverse population, and economic prosperity. But after the region was conquered by the Qing dynasty, which later became the Republic of China, a number of Muslim ethnic groups in the region still made periodic attempts at armed insurrection against Chinese rule into the 20th century. In 1955, the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, ZAR, was formed, and according to its first national census, Uyghurs made up more than 70% of the population. But while they were once the predominant ethnic group in the region, the Uyghurs now make up less than half of the 26 million people who inhabit the area. This is partly because of the Chinese government provided economic incentives for the Han Chinese to migrate to Xinjiang. But things started to take a different turn. The past 2 decades have witnessed an increase in ethnic activity in the ZAR, from protests to violent efforts to establish an independent state and rebellion against Chinese rule. These incidents were often motivated by growing economic disparities and ethnic tensions between the Uyghur and Han populations. One major instance of violent outbreak occurred in Urumqi in July 2009, where nearly 200 people, mostly Han, were killed and over 1,700 were injured. A number of other violent incidents include armed attack and bombings by assailants and suicide bombers. It was around this time that Chinese authorities responded by cracking down on Uyghurs suspected of being separatists with extremist ideologies. In the summer of 2018, the United Nations officially released a report claiming that at least 1 million Uyghurs had been detained in counter-extremism centers in Xinjiang. This thrust the Uyghur issue into global headlines. Officially, the camps are known as vocational education and training centers where Uyghurs undergo physical training activities, Chinese classes, and according to former detainees, brainwashing techniques to erase ethnic identity and replace it with loyalty to China. In fact, mainstream outlets like CNN, BBC, and the New York Times have published many articles from first-hand accounts that said the camps involved torture and even death. Turns out, it's more complicated than that. According to Chinese reports, these centers were made due to rising concerns about political domestic insurgency and the links between certain extremist Uyghurs in China and terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Chinese officials say the camps are no different from the Distance and Disengagement Program (DDP) of the UK or the de-radicalization centers in France. To explore this further, TMJ spoke with Professor Barry Sutman, a political scientist and lawyer in Columbia University who has done extensive field research in Xinjiang. He said the growing terrorist activity in Xinjiang region is well documented in Western academia. For example, the University of Maryland Global Terrorism Database recorded that over 700 people were killed in Xinjiang due to terrorist attacks, and the main 2 culprits are labeled as Uyghur separatists and Turkestan Islamic Party. He added that over the course of a decade, the influence of religious extremists in Xinjiang increased, and according to Professor Sutman, it was closely connected to terrorist activity. A majority of Uyghurs began demanding an independent East Turkestan state based on Islamic law, and they sought to expel the outsiders, which included not just the Han Chinese, but even some Muslim groups they did not get along with. While conducting fieldwork in Xinjiang, Professor Sutman noted that a significant portion of the Uyghur population was influenced by a Wahhabist ideology directly fueled by scholars trained in Saudi Arabia, or Wahhabist mosques in Turkey. Thus, the religion extremism that many Muslims deny has been well documented in the Xinjiang region. But the issue is that Chinese officials have been indiscriminately targeting the Uyghurs, even for simply wearing a face veil or having a beard. And while China's approach to the Uyghur issue is regarded as a national security matter, it has frequently spiraled out of control to target innocent Uyghur Muslims who have become victims of a growing terrorism paranoia. But here's where it gets even trickier. Western nations have been quick to speak out against Beijing's treatments of the Uyghurs and slam China with sanctions and condemnations for its human rights violations, but they have been completely silent about the oppression of Muslims globally, such as in Palestine. As such, a key question remains: is this about humanitarianism or politics?